Paul Rossi, and I'm the Director of Customer Engagement here at Foothold Technology. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Ben Barr, who's the implementation manager or implementation and data manager here at Foothold for FCM. As many folks know, we have both an awards product and an FCM product, and Ben works on the awards side of Foothold Technology. We're going to do a quick introduction and overview, and then we're going to jump right into the Excel training. We'll follow that up with a Q&A section. We've left 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. We'll see how questions come in. If we need to extend things a little bit longer, we've got some time built in there for a little overrun, and then we will do some wrap up. The format for today, a little bit of housekeeping. So everybody is muted. Like I mentioned at the outset, we have a very large crowd today. So we've got everybody muted. We also have chat disabled. We do have the Q&A section live though, so please use Q&A. You have the ability to sort of comment on other folks' questions and upvote other questions, so we can have some dialogue happening there. I'll be answering the questions in as much real time as we can, and if there are questions that we don't get to real time while Ben is doing the presentation, we've got that time built in, like I said there at the end. What we're hoping to do today is promote the idea of using what are very simple data presentations for advocacy. We're going to look at some basic Excel functions to analyze and visualize data. We're going to look at cleaning data and preparing it for analysis. We're going to look at basic data analysis using functions, pivot tables, and data visualization. And then in follow-up, maybe we'll engage on how others are using simple data sets for advocacy in their organizations. When we talk about using data in advocacy, we're talking about a bunch of different things, but I wanted to highlight three things that I think are relatively common. We're advocating for funding. Oftentimes we're asked to demonstrate the success and cost effectiveness of interventions, of the kinds of things we do in our programs to help the individuals that we serve. We advocate a lot for policy, where we use data to grab the attention of policymakers and lawmakers to demonstrate the impact that our programs are having, the impact not only in the individuals we're serving, but the broader impact on the communities that we serve. And it allows us to highlight changes, or the challenges rather, that the population you serve face. And we also highlight problems with advocacy or with data in advocacy, where we focus on disparities and inequalities faced by the populations you serve versus the general population. So there's a number of different ways that we look at data. Hopefully some of that resonates with you. There are broader uses, of course, and then we can talk about that when we get through the presentation. Many of you know that both Foothold and FCM offer business intelligence products. So we offer very sophisticated reporting within the application. But oftentimes Excel is a better tool, and we've got this chart here to just talk about what some of those differences might be and why we're using Excel. And while we are using Excel today, the same sort of things apply to Google Sheets if you're in a Google shop. So the functionality is almost identical, very, very largely the same. We find that Excel is much easier to learn than a business intelligence tool. It's faster with smaller data sets. It's much more cost effective. Almost every machine that you launch today has an Excel link on it, or through Google, the ability to use Google Sheets at very low or no cost. And they're very commonly used. When you talk about Excel or you talk about a sheet, folks typically know what you're talking about. In business intelligence tools, they're a bigger beast. So they're also faster with large data sets. They offer more functionality, and because the tool is often directly connected to the data sets that you're using, you oftentimes have better data integrity. So moving forward, I'm going to invite Ben to talk about what he's going to cover on the Excel training component of our session, and then we'll jump right in. Ben?
Thanks so much, Paul. Hey everyone, this is Ben from the FCM team at Foothold. Before I dive into the training, I'll just give you a brief overview of the kinds of things we'll be showing you. The training is divided into basically 4 sections. The first is asking the most appropriate business question. The second is selecting the most appropriate data for the job. The third is cleaning and vetting the data. And the fourth is analyzing it. And we're going to be using various tools throughout each of these topics, such as formulas, pivot tables, and graphical visualizations, such as charts. So without further ado, I'm going to begin sharing my screen. Of course, none of the data shown in this training is real data. It is all fictional data. Here we go. So for this training, we will be dealing with a fictional assignment where we've been asked to give an overview of what people's favorite pizza toppings are in this fictional population. And we have been given two sets of data. This one right here that we're looking at, and then this one over here. First things first, you want to make sure that this is saved as an Excel file with an ending such as .xlsx, not as a CSV file. I'm sure there's plenty of people on this call who have worked in a CSV file and then they save their work. And then when they open the file up again, most of their work is gone because CSV files don't support a lot of things that Excel files do support, such as multiple tabs. So if you've got a file with 3 tabs open and you save it as a CSV and you open it again, now 2 of the tabs are gone and you'll only have 1 tab, and that can be really disastrous. So just first things first, make sure you're saving it as a .xlsx extension or .xls, not .csv, because when you save that, you will lose a bunch of stuff. Also, labeling things appropriately can save you a lot of heartache. For example, you'll note here that I have these 2 tabs saved with the default names. One is just called Sheet 1 and one is just called Sheet 2. Simply by giving these more sensible names that clearly identify what kind of data lives there is going to make it easier for you to work with your own data, or if somebody else has to use this later, it'll be easier for them too. So right off the bat, I'm just going to relabel these. So this first data set is just a list of members. It's got their member ID, where they live, and what their name is. And again, all of this data is fake. These are not real people's names. So I'm going to label this members. And then I've got this other tab unhelpfully named Sheet 2. I want to relabel that as well. Let's take a look at what's over here. It looks like a list of members with their favorite pizza topping and then the date on which that information was collected. So maybe we can name this toppings. Great. That's already going to make it a lot easier for me to do things with this data. The first thing you want to do once you've made sure that when you save your file, it's not going to erase a bunch of your work, or that you actually know what you're looking at because you've labeled it properly, is you want to make sure that you are answering an appropriate business question. Really, one of the main things that you can do with data in Excel is use the analysis for advocacy purposes. But before you go off on a long journey of cleaning the data and making charts and all that stuff, you want to make sure that the question you are trying to answer is actually appropriate for the point that you are trying to make. In this hypothetical example, we are tasked with figuring out a way to illustrate what people's favorite pizza toppings are in this fictional population. So that makes sense. We have the list of people, we have where they live, and we have their favorite toppings. So that is an appropriate business question given this fictional scenario. Next, you want to make sure that you clean the data. And you've probably heard this a lot. You want to clean your data. And Paul, if you wouldn't mind launching the first quiz question, I want to see how many people know about cleaning data. So it's often necessary to clean data prior to analyzing it, because there could be issues within the data that would reduce the accuracy of the analysis. What are some examples of such data issues? I'm going to give you maybe like 30 seconds to answer. Gosh, it looks
Questions
like,
are coming in fast. Can you
yeah,
see
it
the responses coming in?
looks like people have a lot of experience with data issues that perhaps they had to deal with. Yeah, once that kind of thing happens once, it's hard to forget. I think this is the fastest I've ever seen a group answer a survey question. We already have like 80 something responses. Okay. Well, as most of you guessed, the answer is all of the above. Duplicated data is a very common issue, and it's very annoying when it happens, and it can be very taxing to fix. Test data or data entered in error is also a thing that happens pretty often, even though it's supposed to never happen because production data is supposed to be kept separate from test data. Improperly formatted data is another issue. So this often happens with dates, where you're expecting something to be like day slash month slash year, but maybe it is just like a completely crazy thing that Excel doesn't even recognize as a date. Missing data is a big problem too, and that's one of the hardest problems to deal with because if something is missing, you might not know that it's missing because it's not there. The correct answer here was all of the above. All of these are issues that, all of these are examples of data issues that you may encounter. But now that you know that these issues can happen, you can take measures to A, check for them, and B, fix them if they happen. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. So first of all, I'm going to share the results too. The ideal way to check for the completeness of your data, meaning you have everything you need, you have all your data, number one, and number two, you don't have inappropriate data. In other words, you have all and only the data you need. That's what you want. So you want to check for things that shouldn't be there but are, and you want to check for things that should be there but are not. The best way to do that is to do what's called a bidirectional lookup, which is just a fancy way of saying look up your data against something else in both directions, and you want to use a source of truth. A source of truth is just a data set that you know is right. So this could be a report that was already made, that has already been published, and that like the CEO has presented, and everyone would bet their whole life savings that that report is accurate. You could check your data against that report. And then if it matches up in both directions, then you know what you have is good. Or if you've gotten your data from some kind of data export, maybe there's another kind of data export you could check yours against just to make sure that everything is there. So a bidirectional lookup works like this. You want to use a formula that I will explain more later called a VLOOKUP, and you want to VLOOKUP each of your data points in the set that you were given against your source of truth, the thing that you would swear is right. And you want to make sure that everything in your data set is in your source of truth. If there's stuff in your data set that's not in your source of truth, that probably means it's not supposed to be in your data set. So maybe it's a duplicate, maybe it's test data. You want to do that lookup the other way. You want to make sure that everything in your source of truth, again, that's the thing that everyone is very confident is correct. You want to make sure that everything there is in the data that you're working with. And if it isn't, that means you have missing data in your data set. And don't worry, I will show examples of how to use VLOOKUP in just a bit. That is the best thing you can do. I'll repeat that. The best thing you can do to make sure that you have all and only the data that you need is to do a two-way lookup against a source of truth. And the source of truth is another set of data that has like already been vetted and everyone is very sure that it's accurate. Make sure that what you have is in that source of truth, and make sure that what's in that source of truth is in what you're working with. Now, you might not be able to do that because you might not have a source of truth. Maybe the data that you were given is allegedly the source of truth already, and so you don't have anything to check it against. That is entirely possible, and that can happen. And so if that's the case, that's all right. There are still ways to check to make sure that you have all and only what you need. First, the easiest way to do it is to make sure that the count of what you have is sensible. Not too high, not too low. And now I'm actually going to show you something in Excel. I'm going to use a formula called COUNTIF to get a count of all of the members in this member tab. And it works like this. I'm going to type, so by the way, I just created a new row here. I'm on a Windows computer. I right-clicked with my mouse on this one here, this gray number 1 on the left. And then I got a bunch of options and I selected insert. Depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC or what version of Excel you have, it could look a little different. But this inserts a new row. And I did that because I want to start typing a formula and I don't want to type it over the stuff that I already have. And I want it to be at the top so I can see it. Now I have this cell selected. A cell is just a rectangle in Excel. You can refer to this cell as a B1 because it is column B, which you can tell because there's a B up here. And it's row 1, which you can tell because there's a number 1 over here on the left. So I've selected row B1 and I'm going to enter that cell by double clicking. You'll see now there's like a flashing vertical line, which means I'm now like inside the cell. And I'm going to type this. I'm going to type equals on my keyboard, count if, and you'll see that as I start typing, Excel is helpfully suggesting formulas for me to use. The more I type, the more specific it gets. And actually, and it'll also, you see this little text that popped up, it's called a tooltip. That's Excel telling me what that formula does. And if I want more information, I can, Google it or whatever. I am going to use, sorry, I'm actually going to use count. I think I said count if, to see how many cells are in column A, which is my member ID. So I'm going to do an open parentheses, and you'll see Excel is trying to help me. It's saying, oh, you're using the count formula. Well, the way that works is first you enter some value that you want to count. So I know that I just want to count however many rows are populated in column A. So I'm just going to type A:A, which means just the whole column all the way down. If I wanted to specify where it starts and where it ends, I could do that. I could say start with A3, because that's the first row that has member IDs in it. It's row 3. I can tell because there's a 3 over here. And I can do a colon, and then I can type the last one, which is I don't know how far down this goes. I haven't checked. Maybe I can just type like an arbitrarily huge number. So I could do that. That gives me a count. It's 101. Let's do that again. And instead of specifying a beginning and end, let's just say the whole column. We'll see if the result is any different. Just AA, no start, no end. It's going to also give 101. The reason for this is it's not counting cell A1 because cell A1 is empty. Count A, if you remember, I'm reading what Excel's telling me. Counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. I'm sorry. Yeah. And it's also not counting. I'm sorry. it's count, not count A. There's so many count formulas with similar names. My apologies. Count counts the number of cells that contain a number. So it's not counting A1 because A1 is blank, and it's not counting A2 because A2 is not a number. A2 is text. It says member ID. So this means I have 101 members here. That's useful to know. Now that I know I have 101 members in this data, I need to ask myself, well, is that how many members I was expecting? In this fictional world, let's say that's not. Maybe there were supposed to be 150. And so now I know, well, this data is missing members, and now I need to go to whoever gave me this data, and I need to say, hey, you only gave me 101 members. Don't we have 150 per this other report? And that's one way that I can just do a little sanity check. Just get a count. Do I have everything? If the count is too low, you're missing stuff. If the count is too high, you have extra stuff. But here's a catch. You could have the right count and still be missing stuff, because you could be missing stuff and you could have extra stuff that's not supposed to be there, and they could cancel out. And you might be thinking, what are the odds of that happening? And it turns out the odds are not that low, and that's happened to me a bunch. And maybe there's some of you to whom that has happened. So you can't just trust the count. That's why I said the bidirectional lookup is the best way to do it. So that's one thing you can do, just get a count. Another thing you can do is you can look for suspicious gaps in the data. For this, I'm going to use a pivot table. One thing that you should also do to make sure that you have all of your data is make sure that there isn't a space in your data. I'll show you what I mean. If I scroll down, because I'm curious to know where my data ends, it looks like it ends here, doesn't it? But if I keep going down, oh, look, there's more data. Note that there's a member with ID number 196 right here. If I were to add filters to this data by selecting row 1 and clicking on the filter button, and I click on this little drop down and I type 196, that member doesn't come up because when I applied the filters by clicking on the row and clicking filters, Excel stopped the jurisdiction of the filter when the data stopped. So this is a nice little thing to be aware of. Don't trust filters that you apply for the whole row like that. If you apply the filters to the columns like this, it's going to catch everything, even if there's a big gap in the rows that you didn't see. This has happened to me many times, and you don't want to let it happen to you. And now I can actually see if I click member ID, there are now blanks. Blanks are bad. I don't want blanks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the blanks by, see how it says select all up here? I'm going to uncheck that box, and I'm going to scroll to the bottom, and I'm going to check blanks, and I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to select all of these blanks, and I'm going to delete them because that's annoying. I don't want these blanks to be here. They could mess me up. So I've clicked and I've dragged, and now I'm going to right click on any one of these, and I'm going to click delete. And now my blanks are gone. And now no matter how I put the filter on, whether it's by just clicking on the row like this or clicking on the columns like this, it's going to capture everything. And the blanks can't mess me up because they're gone now because I've deleted them. That's another very useful thing you can do. So now that I have my data with no blanks, I am going to use something called a pivot table to see what data I have. I've clicked on insert and I'm going to click on pivot table. Automatically, Excel is suggesting this whole row of data, and you'll see that it highlighted it as well. Sorry, my Zoom heads-up display is blocking me from clicking on things.
Are you able to drag it to the bottom of your screen or pull it over to the side?
Yes. Oh, here we go. So you'll see this outline, this dotted outline is all of the cells that Excel is suggesting be included. I should scroll to the bottom to make sure it's got them all and only them. Yes, it does. And I'm going to hit OK. A pivot table is Excel's built-in tool that lets you summarize information. So now I'm going to just see, I'm going to drag, these are all of the fields. Remember, I had 3 columns. I can put them I can put one of these in the row section, this quadrant over here. And now Excel will show me all of the possible values for the boroughs in the rows. And if I want to see how many rows fall into each of these categories, I can drag another field, either one, it doesn't matter as long as it's populated for all of them. Let's take name, and I can drag it into this values section. It's just going to count them up. Right away, I see some weird stuff. Look at this. One of my boroughs is called test. Let's go back into the members data and investigate that. This was one of those things that you all correctly identified as a problem that can happen. I'm going to filter the borough of residence to test. And would you look at that? These names also look a little suspicious. I think these are characters from a TV show, but this looks wrong. I'm going to contact whoever gave me this data and ask that they please double check to make sure there's no test data in there because I found some. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to do the same thing I did before to delete it. Now I'm going to go back to my summary tab, and I'm going to click refresh all to update the pivot table. So that's gone, but I noticed something else is weird. I don't think Queens is a borough. So now I have to investigate that. And when I filter for that, I'm just going to assume this was supposed to say Queens, but I should probably also contact whoever gave me this data to double check and make sure that that is what it's supposed to say. That's another problem solved. I've just edited the data. But there's something else funny about these boroughs. Aren't there supposed to be 5 boroughs in New York City? Where's Staten Island? Looks like we've got another data completion problem. So I not only had stuff that shouldn't have been there, but I'm missing something. So whoever gave me this data perhaps accidentally left out Staten Island, and I need to contact them. So we're already finding lots of mistakes here. We're finding things that were there that shouldn't be there, things that shouldn't be there that were there. Now I want to talk briefly about formatting. I mentioned earlier that dates can be formatted incorrectly. That's a common thing. There's no dates in this data, in the member data, but there are dates in the topping data. I'm going to do the same thing by applying a filter by selecting the columns, and I'm just going to click on the data, the date collected column to see what kinds of dates are there here. So I see that there's 2024, 2023, and this looks like a date, but Excel's not putting it into the 2023 category. That's weird. Let's filter for that and investigate. Oops. I think we have to scroll down to get this one. There it is. You'll also note that it is aligned to the left. And when I click on the cell, there's this little apostrophe all the way at the left. I don't know if you can see it. The other dates don't have that. Let me get rid of that. This was causing that date to be formatted as text. And now if I click here again, you'll see it's gone. It is now correctly formatted as a date. So I'm glad I caught that. That would have messed me up. Let's expand these by clicking on the pluses. Well, that's interesting. There's a March 2024, there's a March 2023, but there's a January 2023. That seems to be sticking out. Let's look for that one. And I know that I don't have that many, so I can afford to just scroll through. Otherwise, I would filter for it. This is weird. It almost looks like it was supposed to say March 1st. I'm going to, again, contact whoever gave me this data and ask them to review. Let's say that they review and they say, whoops, you were right, that was supposed to be March. This assessment for favorite pizza toppings is supposed to happen on March 1st annually. So that one was just an error, and we fixed that now. Another great thing to check. Another way you can check to make sure that you don't have values that you shouldn't have or malformed values is if there's a small number of possible values, just click on the filter dropdown and eyeball them. Is there anything that looks like it shouldn't be there? If you have, hundreds of possible values, that's not going to work. That will take forever. Let's check for duplicates in the members list. We know that we have duplicates. Excel has a duplicate removal tool that a lot of people like to use. In data, which is where I am now, the data tab here, I can use this remove duplicates tool to remove duplicates, but that's dangerous because I don't know which duplicates are going to get removed. I would rather just find all the duplicates and then figure out which ones, if any, to remove. My favorite way to do that personally is to use a unique ID and sort it. Let's say we're going to sort this ID from smallest to largest. And then I'm going to add a formula that will flag any one that is duplicated. You can also use conditional formatting for this, but I find that that slows down Excel a lot sometimes. Now I'm going to add a column, and I'm going to use a formula to try to find duplicates. I'm going to, instead of using a count like I was using before, I'm going to use an if. I'm going to type equals if, and again, Excel is helping me. Open parentheses. I'm going to click on this cell A2, and I'm going to type equals and then I'm going to click on the cell above A1, or I can just type A1. I'm saying if A2 equals A1, then, comma, say duplicate or dupe or whatever. And I put that in quotes because I want it to be text that shows up. And if it's not a dupe, then I don't want Excel to say anything. And so I put two double quotes next to each other, and then I end my parentheses. This is just telling Excel, hey, if that cell equals the one above it, tell me. And I hit enter. And then I've clicked on this cell, and then I'm going to double click on the bottom right corner where there's like a little box. And that's going to cause the formula to populate all the way down. And oh, look, it found one. Here, I can see that it is a true duplicate. The member ID is the same, the borough is the same, the name is the exact same. I feel comfortable just removing this. So I'm just going to right-click and delete it. This will break my formula, but that's okay. I can just double-click on it again to make it go all the way down again. Now I'm going to click on my filter just to make sure there weren't any more of those. There aren't. Okay, so at least on member ID, there's no duplicates. It is possible that there are duplicates on member name. But if there are, that doesn't mean it's the same person. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But that is something else to consider when you're looking for duplicates. And now I'm going to get rid of this column because I don't need it anymore.
Ben,
Now
can
I'm
I
going to
ask
show you, yes.
just a quick question and a
Yeah.
quick time check as well? It's a few minutes after 3 now. And I wanted to, there was a question that we had gotten, and was how do you select a large section of data or a selection of data without having to click and scroll? So if you were in A1, let's say, and you wanted to select all the records down to the bottom of your list without clicking and scrolling, how would you do that?
I want to take that at the end only because I
Okay,
want to show VLOOKUP and the chart. But
perfect.
that's a great question, and I do want to show that. So now finally, VLOOKUP, which is a formula that maybe some of you know, it's extremely powerful. And this is actually the perfect segue. Paul, could you please launch quiz question number 2? And I know that we're quickly running out of time. We might have to eat into the Q&A a little bit. It's common for a data set to not have all of the data points needed for an analysis. Like in this case, we want to know each person's favorite topping, but we don't have that in the members list. We have that in the toppings list. In Excel, what's the most effective way to bring in a data point from one data set to another? All right, looks like people are not answering this one quite as quickly as the first one, but still very quickly.
This one was trickier. And I think that it's
This one is a
perfectly
lot
fine
trickier.
to eat into a little bit of our Q&A. The
Yeah,
questions have been quiet, so it could be that we're saving a bunch until the end. So
right. This is true.
looks like C is very popular.
Let's give people just like 10 more seconds.
Couple outliers though.
All right, let's end that poll
All right,
and let's share the results.
there
The
they are.
answer is VLOOKUP. If you copy and paste the whole column in, the data is just not going to align, and it's not going to work at all. You can find a common value across both data sets. Like in this case, member ID is in both data sets. So I could say, okay, what's member 108's favorite topping? Let's just find 108 in the toppings list. Oh, it's cheese and plain. Okay, I can just copy that in. But I'll be here all day. I could have hundreds of thousands of rows. That's not going to work. Although it does technically work if you just want to look up one. Fast poll, answer choice D, is not a formula. I made that up. The answer is VLOOKUP, which almost all of you got. And I'm going to show you how to use that right now. Important note about VLOOKUP is it will pull the first result it finds from top to bottom. Here in this toppings data, it is possible that the data was collected on more than one date for the same member. And indeed, you can see like this member right here. It was collected on March 2023 and March 2024. I want the one that is collected most recently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort the date from newest to oldest. Now when I do my VLOOKUP, it is guaranteed to always pull the newest one. And so here it is. Here's how VLOOKUP works. I'm going to add a new column. I'm going to right click on, let's say, column C and click insert. Great. And I'm going to give this a sensible label. In fact, let me just copy the label from the other data set so that it's easy to see what I did. And now I'm going to type equals VLOOKUP. The V stands for vertical. And I need a unique identifier in both data sets. In this case, that is member ID. I'm going to click on cell A2. I'm going to hit a comma. I'm going to go into my toppings data set. And I'm going to click on the column label A, and I'm going to click and hold and drag it over to B. And I'm going to let go, and I'm going to hit comma. And then I'm going to hit 2. 2 tells Excel how many columns over to pull. In this case, I want to pull 2 columns over. From A to B is 2. A, B, 1, 2, comma, and then I'm just going to type 0. Don't worry about what that means exactly. And then I'm going to end my parentheses, and I'm going to hit enter. Oh, look, it pulled it in. And now I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to click on the bottom right corner of this formula to cause it to populate all the way down. Great. Note that some say NA. By the way, now that these have populated all the way down, I'm just going to copy. I hit Control C on my keyboard to do that. And now I'm going to right click, and I'm going to paste as values. So the formulas are gone. Great. And NA means that the VLOOKUP didn't find a value at all. That could be another data completion problem. Maybe these members truly never had their favorite pizza topping collected, or maybe the pizza topping data is missing. I don't know. I'm going to notify whoever. If I go over here to my pivot table and I hit refresh all, I'm going to have a new field here. Look, favorite pizza topping is now available. And if I want to break out the boroughs by favorite pizza topping, I can click and drag favorite pizza topping and drag it into the rows under borough. And oh, look, this is now starting to be useful. And you know what? Let's sort this from there we go. So in Queens, they love cheese. In Brooklyn, they love cheese. And well, they actually love mushrooms the most. In Manhattan, they love olives the most, etc. This is useful. It took me a little bit to get to this point, but this is starting to be useful. I'm starting to answer that business question of, generally speaking, what are people's favorite pizza toppings? Now, as for the NAs, I am going to leave those out of my data for now. I'm going to click on this gray dropdown. By the way, you'll note that Excel still thinks that test is here and that Queens is here, even though it isn't. You can just ignore that. Filters section, and I'm going to deselect NA. Another thing I can do is I can just go into my data and delete it for now, and just say, hey, this is useless to me. These members don't have favorite pizza toppings. I'm gonna, send those securely to whoever gave me this data and say, hey, you please figure out if these people were missing data or not. So I've just deleted that data. I filtered for the NAs and I right clicked and I deleted. I'm going to refresh. This is nice now. This is nice, but I'd rather have a visualization. And so this is the last thing I'm going to show. I'm going to show how to create visualizations. I'm going to use a chart. And Paul, would you mind launching the third quiz question? I want to know, generally speaking, for each borough, what's the most popular pizza topping? So here's the question: to better understand a data point, like borough of residence, or in this case, favorite pizza topping by borough, it's often valuable to break it out into non-overlapping categories, like in the case of borough, Queens, the Bronx, etc. What chart type most effectively illustrates such breakouts? So again, you want to break out some data point into a bunch of categories that do not overlap. So maybe the data point is borough and the data points are Queens and the Bronx. Maybe the data point is pizza topping and the options are cheese, mushrooms, olives, etc. This is a tricky question because you can use whatever chart you want, It's just that some might make more intuitive sense than others. None of the charts will lie to you. Let's give it 10 more seconds.
I think only one of the charts will remember. Oh, and somebody just selected it if it lies to you.
Right.
But,
All right. That's the end of our poll. The answer is a pie chart. You can use a bar chart. Many people find pie charts to make more intuitive sense because you can see how big is the slice compared to the whole pie. Whereas with the bar chart, it's hard to tell how big the whole bar is because you probably won't have a whole bar. And an elephant chart is a thing that I made up. It does not exist to my knowledge. But let's very quickly show how to make charts in Excel. And in this case, I'm going to use a pie chart. You can make a chart based off a pivot table, by the way. I'm going to click Insert, Recommended Charts. Excel can suggest a chart type to you. And by the way, if you're not sure what the best type is to use, just try one. And if it doesn't really make sense, try another one. And then pick whichever one makes the most sense. So I'm going to insert a pie chart here by clicking on this pie chart icon. Let's just keep it simple with a 2D chart. And let's just get a chart for Queens. So I have clicked on the borough dropdown. I deselected everything and I selected Queens and I hit OK. Oops. Oh no. Oh, I clicked on Queens by accident. There we go. Here we go. Now, if you look at the legend, you can see blue is cheese. Clearly, blue is the favorite. The majority of the people in Queens prefer cheese. The second biggest is orange, which we can see as mushrooms. The third biggest is olives. And I can add labels to this as well. I can right click and I can hover over add data labels, click on add data labels, and now it's got the numbers in there. They're a little hard to see. I can make them bigger. I can change their color, etc. But making a chart is as easy as that. Let's make these white. So right away, if I just make this a little prettier, give it a sensible title, maybe add a little note at the bottom. This is now finished. I have answered the business question of what are people's favorite toppings. Maybe I'll have one pie chart per borough. Maybe I'll have one pie chart for all the boroughs combined. But that's it. I know that we went through this very quickly because we didn't have a lot of time, but what we did was we went through making sure you're asking an appropriate business question that will get you the answer that you're looking for your purposes, be it advocacy or whatever. We made sure that you have all and only the data you need, meaning if there's stuff in there that shouldn't be there, you find it and delete it. If there's stuff that should be in there that's missing, you figure out a way to identify that. And then you ask whoever gave you the data to check again. Make sure that data is formatted correctly. We figured out how to bring in data from another data set using a VLOOKUP, how to create a pivot table, how to make a chart. We did a lot of stuff. If this was fast, I apologize. This is our first one, and we're working on the pacing. How much time do we have for the Q&A at this point? Or have
so
I used up all of our time?
no, we actually have quite a bit of time left, and I
Oh,
appreciate
good.
you mentioning that this is the first one that we're doing, and we're inclined to do some more. You'll see a survey when we actually finish and close the Zoom today. I would love for folks to take a minute to fill that out because we're asking in there for other ideas that you might have, because Ben and I have thought about developing a series of these where we'll build each off the next or the previous and get you a little bit further along, and we see some excitement in the questions and answers. So we have a couple of questions, Ben.
Mhm.
I want to go back to the first question, which was, how do you select a large
Yeah,
section of data without having to click and
great question.
scroll?
Great question. I wish that I could somehow cause every person on Earth to know how to do this, because it's so helpful. It's utterly game changing. At least this is how it works on a Windows machine. I don't know how it works on a Mac. It's probably similar, but I'm going to click on the first cell that I want. And let's say I want to go down first. I'm going to press my shift key and hold it down. And then while my shift key is held down, I'm going to press my down arrow key and my end key. And then that just automatically warps me to the bottom. And now if I want to go all the way to the right, again, I press shift, I hold shift down, but this time I'm not going to press the down key. I'm going to press the right key, the right arrow key, and I'm again going to press the end key on my keyboard. So shift, right, and end, and now it's just going to warp me all the way to the right. This won't work if there are breaks in the data, which is another way to find them. We covered that in this session as well, making sure you don't have any empty rows. But this lets me select all of them. And I can use the left, the right, and the down arrows at the same time to select everything super fast. Watch this. There. And even if this were like 1,000 columns long, I would still get to the end exactly as fast, assuming there's no breaks in the rows or in the columns, because that will just stop the selection. Super useful. Let's see, what other questions do we have?
So another question is, when using the if formula to find duplicates, how were the cells selected? They missed that part.
Yeah, so I'm just going to do that part again. So I right-clicked on column B, hit insert, and then I just clicked into the cell into which I want the formula to be. And then I just started typing the formula. I typed if, and then you have choices. You can either type on your keyboard like A2 equals A1, or I can just click on cell A2, and then that causes the formula to say A2. And then I can type equals, and then I can click on cell A1. It's up to you. It's whatever you feel like doing. And then I just finish the formula, comma one, or comma dupe, or whatever. I can make that be whatever I want, because that to me will just mean that it is a duplicate. And then I want it to say nothing if it's not a duplicate. Or if I wanted to, instead of having it say nothing, I could have it say not a duplicate. It's up to you. And I just hit enter. And to make the formula go all the way down, if you see there's like a little like tiny little box in the lower right corner of this outline of the cell. And when I hover my cursor over that, it changes from a white plus to like a thin cross, like a thin plus. If I double click, that just automatically populates the formula all the way down to the bottom, assuming there's no breaks in the data like empty rows, and assuming there's nothing in the way. This is actually good to know. Let's say I have something here, just like there's some data there. If I click on this now, it's going to stop at row 5 because the A was in the way. But if I delete this, I can continue. So you just want to make sure that if you're going to use that trick, scroll to the bottom to make sure that it actually went everywhere it's supposed to. I hope that answered the question. But if not, please let us know and we'll try again. It
I
looks
think
like
that
we don't have open questions at the moment.
we don't. I have two statements though. One is there was a question earlier about whether we were going to release the recording, and absolutely we'll release the recording. It will probably get sent out tomorrow. And the other thing that I'm gonna ask Ben live because I didn't ask him in advance. Uh, can we distribute this Excel sheet or this
Yes,
workbook with the file as well, so that folks would be
yes,
able to go in and play with this data set and build off
absolutely.
of what you've done already?
Yep.
Excellent. So are there any questions? We still have quite a few. We've got 10 minutes left, so we have some time. We've gotten a question. Can you review the syntax of the VLOOKUP formula?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I'm just moving this heads-up display stuff. So I'm just going to do it over again. Basically, you want to create, whenever you're using a formula that is going to apply to like a bunch of rows, it just usually makes sense to make a new column for it. Where that column goes is up to you. So I'm going to type equals VLOOKUP. And by the way, when Excel suggests the formulas to you, you can just click on the suggestion and it like finishes writing it for you. And Excel also helps you. It like defines the general structure of what needs to go in the formula. So here it's saying the lookup value goes first. What is a lookup value? It is the unique identifier that is in both of your data sets that you want to use to sort of join them together. Um, in this case, it's the member ID. So I want to start with cell A2, so I just click on cell A2. Next, Excel says I need the table array, which is kind of a weird way of saying, say the first column that you want to do the looking up from, and then say the last one. So I'm going to go over to my toppings data, I know that member ID is in column A. I need that because that's the thing that joins the two data sets. So I have to start with that one. And I end with the one that I want to pull in. In this case, it's just one column over. Isn't that convenient? And so the table array here is, and here it says toppings because that specifies that I'm now in the toppings tab. If I took this out, it would be columns A and B in the original tab, which is not what I want. Excel automatically put that in there when I switched to the toppings tab to be convenient, which is awesome. So this is what Excel means by table array. It's like all the columns and cells that inside of them is where the looking up is going to happen. Then I need a comma, and then the next thing is column index number. That is Excel's way of saying how many numbers over, how many columns over from the first column do you want to pull? And in this case, it's just two, because the favorite pizza toppings is just two columns over. You might be thinking, well, isn't it just one column over? But Excel considers it to be two, because if I put one, it's just going to pull the member ID back, which would be useless because I already know what the member ID is. So I put two, and then comma 0. You don't really need to worry about why I'm putting a 0. If you want to, you can Google it. I don't even think it's that interesting, to be honest. And then that's it. That's the whole syntax. And then that just pulls this in. And then I again do that thing where I double click here and I scroll down to the bottom to make sure it actually went all the way down, which it did. And you'll note that I'm not getting any NA values, hashtag NA. That is Excel's way of saying, you gave us a formula, but the formula wasn't able to produce anything. It encountered some kind of error. It wasn't able to finish its instructions or its calculations. The reason why I'm not getting NAs this time is because if you remember, I already deleted all of the members from my member dataset who didn't have a match, because in this hypothetical scenario, I just decided that was the right thing to do. Maybe another thing to do would just be to leave them and mark them as no match so that you don't lose them. Or you can delete, or you can just copy them, put them somewhere else for safekeeping, and then delete them. It's up to you what you do with that once you find it. But that's the syntax for the VLOOKUP formula.
And while you're right there looking at the syntax there, the question that we got was, must the columns be next to each other in
Nope.
in this case, the toppings sheet for VLOOKUP to work?
Nope. But they do have to be in left-right order. So here's an example. I've just put them 4 columns away from each other. Excel is really smart. It changed the table array to be A through D. It was A through B before. Excel automatically changed it to be A through D because I inserted columns in the middle of that area where the formula was pointing to. But you'll note that it still says 2. So it's still pulling from just the second one over. And it's telling me 0 because that is Excel's way of saying, we found a match. We found the member ID 108 over here in this column, but there wasn't anything over here. It's weird that it doesn't just give a blank, it gives a 0. I don't know why it does that. That's just what it does. But if I just, put something else here, now that's going to show up. So I want it, because now I want it to pull over from 4, I have to change the 2 to a 4. And now it's pulling the toppings again. They don't have to be next to each other, but they do have to be in left-right order. So if they happen to be not in left-right order, maybe they're in right-left order, for example, like this, I can't use a VLOOKUP on member ID to pull favorite pizza topping. So when this happens, you have 2 choices. You can just move the column or just create a duplicate over here, call it like member ID again or something, and then just copy everything from here to there. Or use a more sophisticated formula that allows you to pull from right to left. But that formula is so much harder to use that I don't think it's worth it in most cases, and it's easier to just move the column or make a copy of the column. But great question.
Good. And that actually wraps up the question. This is probably a great place to stop. Ben, I think that presentation was fantastic. I will tell you, I even learned a couple of new things, which I am delighted for. we talked at the beginning, and we still have your screen up, Ben, as you're working through all
Yeah.
of your items there. When we stop the session, you will get a prompt for a survey, and you'll also get one as a part of the follow-up. We'd love to hear your thoughts because, like I said, we're really exploring using this as a series. And if folks are getting value out of it, we would love to carve a little time out and do these frequently. I'd also like to find out from you if any of you have used data from a relatively simple data set using Excel, that sort of thing, to put together any kind of data campaign, whether it's for advocacy or something else, and you're comfortable sharing, I would love to connect with you and talk about what it is you're doing, so that we could take a look at that and both use it for reference, frankly, because I think that having things available that other people could perhaps model is very, very useful. And I want to share my screen here real quickly, simply so that we can show you our contact information, so that you have it. We've got, I'm a little bit more straightforward, B-Bar at Foothold for Ben, and then Paul at Foothold for me. I want to thank Ben, of course, and I want to thank all of you for taking time to join us today. We had a large number of folks, and I'm delighted to say that so many of you stayed all the way to the end, which is really enjoyable to see. So thank you very much. We'll get the recording up tomorrow together with the workbook. We'll do any kinds of follow-up that you're interested in seeing, and we are interested in hearing from you about any data advocacy campaigns or any kind of data campaigns that your organization has worked on a small scale or even a large scale. So thanks everybody for attending, and we will see you the next time. Thanks very much.